Welcome to the AIA Minneapolis Women in Architecture Committee. My name is Katie Kangas, and I am the founder of Pask Architecture and a storyteller for the Flying Solo podcast. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of the Women in Architecture Committee here in Minnesota. In honor of a decade of engagement, I am interviewing the past 10 co-chairs of this committee. Please sit back and enjoy as we reflect on where the profession of architecture has been in the past 10 years. We talk about how things are going and look forward to the future that awaits women practicing in architecture.
I'm here with Maureen Colburn. Welcome, Maureen.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're practicing.
Thanks, Katie. I'm so honored to be interviewed. I have been in the industry and profession for 26 years. I moved here in 1988 to Minneapolis. I'm still working in Minneapolis, and I just celebrated my 20-year anniversary with the firm LHB this month. So it's been a long time, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my rather alternative career pathway and some themes from my career. I feel like a major theme has been making a difference, and that includes aspects of sustainability, designing for housing for underserved populations, and today I'm focusing on urgent climate action in my current role at LHB.
It's fun to hear you describe how you're taking on an alternative career path, even within an architecture firm. So we'll have to get more into that a little bit. I'm curious, what do you do on a day off?
I'll usually only take a day off if I'm traveling. So I love to see anything new. I just got back from a little road trip through Iowa. So sometimes it's Europe, sometimes it's the beach in Mexico, but sometimes it's small towns in Iowa. So anywhere that has something to see, I like to soak it all in.
I love that. Traveling is just filled with that opportunity and excitement, and you can just learn so much from all these different places.
The thing that really jumped out at me on this last weekend was a really cool place-based art project. We went to a reception in this very small art gallery for an artist named Jennifer Drinkwater, who is doing a project called What's Good, and she is painting images of what people think of as the good in their community. And I found that to be fascinating. It is about community resilience in rural Iowa, and Mississippi is where she is based. So I found that to be so inspiring.
I love that. And I love seeing how artists are engaging communities because I think they're trying to touch on similar topics as architects. Well, Maureen, you were there at the start when Women in Architecture Committee of AIA Minnesota was just getting started in 2014. Can we just go back to what was happening at that time? What was happening 10 years ago that this became necessary?
Yeah, but we should note that the architecture community did have a women's group much, much earlier, and it had disbanded. Maybe for the reason that people didn't think it was needed anymore. Maybe the women just sort of didn't continue that work. So we were really resurrecting something that had been in place many, many years prior. And the group of us at the time, it included Amy Kalar and Amanda Asmussen and I, as well as some other folks who had gotten together to discuss the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. Lean In is no longer considered a really great example of gender equity initiatives, but it was the book of the time, and it it was one of those books that's kind of saying, just work harder and you'll be okay. And we didn't feel that that was the right message, but it also was the catalyst for a book club discussion and uh, several professional women getting together. And so that in itself was a really great thing that happened as an outcome of that book. And I do think that happened in many communities. So architecturally, I didn't really know any women architects. I didn't go to the U of M, and so I wasn't really aware of a lot of architects outside of my firm. In my firm, at the time, there I really am not sure. There might have been one or two women in my Minneapolis office. So this is, only 10 years ago. Today it's very, very different. But at the time, I didn't really feel that I had a network of support. I had a 2-year-old. Amy and Amanda also had 2-year-olds. And we were, in that time of life that is quite a challenge to be a working parent. And we were looking for any ways to help each other connect. And I think we were talking in the book club, and maybe their stories are a little different than mine. But what I remember is saying, "Oh, we need a way for women to get together, talk to each other." It was at that time we were thinking it might need to be broader than only architecture. We, I believe, used the word design. Uh, And we went, though, to Beverly, who was the executive director at the time, for our professional organization. And she was very, very supportive of bringing this forward to AIA Minnesota as a new committee. And we created a vision. There was some visioning sessions, and our vision, I'm just going to read it because I think it really meant a lot to us at the time, and I know we've been talking about what that means 10 years in. The AIA Minnesota Women in Architecture Committee promotes a strong future for our profession by advocating for women in architecture through recognition, networking, professional development, and mentorship.
I love that. And that's so similar to the current vision as well. I think that's a great testament to the vision that you had just starting off, and seeing a need and designing something that could grow in such an amazing way that it didn't need to be shuttered after 10 years, that it still has work that it's doing now. And so, could you describe some of the work that you are doing as part of Women in Architecture right now?
Yes, so part of that early inspiration was the idea that people really need to see someone who looks like them to understand that they can do that too. And one of those ways in our profession is through submitting for awards or other recognition. The AIA has awards such as the Young Architects Award, and we wanted to encourage women to submit for that. And also, the highest recognition in our industry is called fellowship, as you know. And if you are at a point in your career where you're able to put your story together and do a whole bunch of hard work to submit and then make it through very rigorous process of evaluation, then you can become FAIA. And currently, there are 20 women in the history of Minnesota architecture who have achieved that highest level. And we thought one thing we could do was to help share those stories. And several years ago, we were at one of the early Women's Leadership Summits, which is a gathering of women in architecture across the country. And this one was in Seattle, and they were showing some short documentaries highlighting important women in their community who were farther along in their careers in architecture and serving as inspiration for others. And we thought we can do that too. So we started the FAIA Legacy Project to really increase the visibility of women architects and encourage more women to both continue with their careers, to submit for recognition, to be inspired. And today we have several oral histories documented of these women FAIAs, as well as several short documentary films. We are attempting to premiere a few films each year at our annual state convention and are continuing that work this summer. We're hoping to catch up a bit and get all the 20 documented fully before we hope to have many, many more opportunities as women get elevated to FAIA, hopefully every year forevermore.
People don't know how much goes into that. You think you can just record things and it's done. But there are so many pieces to funding this, to having the woman power and manpower to edit this, and the effort and initiative. And it's a long-standing effort because just a few years ago, it was only 10 FAIA.
Right.
And now it's double that. And it's hopefully going to just keep growing. So it's an incredible effort that you and many other women in our committee have just really taken to heart. And it's been so encouraging because they are really well done documentaries and just very thoughtful and such a diverse range of stories because they've led different career paths. And so you alluded to your own career path being slightly different than what we may think of a traditional architect working their way up the pyramid. So could you describe that a little bit for us?
Sure. I started in a very conventional role of being a project architect working on housing for underserved populations. And I was very, very lucky to have some great mentors. I started my career at Paul Madsen and Associates in 1998, and that firm was bought by LHB after Paul Madsen passed away unexpectedly. And the housing studio at LHB became one of our biggest groups today, even, um, and is still working really hard to serve those communities. Along the way, though, I started really wondering how I could continue to meet the demands of the profession and be a parent. And that's about that time when the committee started and we were trying to figure out like is this even possible? I think all of us were asking that question. Like I mentioned before, I wasn't really seeing women with small children that I could use as role models. I knew a few women architects, but they didn't have children. So it was something that I was really questioning. How can I do this? And the firm at the time had a long-serving office manager retiring. And so there was an opening for that position. It had always been filled by a non-licensed professional. And I said, well, maybe I could do it. And people thought, well, that seems strange. You're a licensed architect. Why would you want to do that role? Um, I really, though, was questioning how I could meet the demands of, buildings under construction and responding to contractor questions and the deadlines of construction documents, all of those things. So I said, I think I would be a good fit for this. I can try this. And I transitioned over to that role. There was many parts of it that I did like, but there were also parts where I felt like my skills weren't really being maximized. But I still wanted to stay with my firm, and so the leaders helped me figure out another pathway, and that was really important, having that leadership support of finding something new without having to leave the firm. One of our top leaders, Rick Carter, has always been a sustainability champion in the Minnesota architectural community. And he was looking at ways of using research into high performance buildings, sustainability, and tracking metrics for knowing if you tried to design a sustainable building, actually having some evidence that you made a difference. Some other projects he was starting to look at going beyond the building scale into the city scale and applying sustainability metrics across the whole city. And so I started working with him on a bunch of related to the built environment, but no longer traditional design practice projects. And along the way, we started a research studio. And over the last few years, as climate action has become more urgently needed, I've evolved the team into what we now call the Climate Solutions Studio. And we focus mostly beyond the building scale, all the way up to the state scale. We look at urgent action in the built environment. So I'm still using the types of skills that I was trained for related to buildings and the way that architects need to think about projects and project management, um, to inform even more impactful action. And I just want to do a little shout out to my colleague, Becky Alexander, who I work with very closely every day on this work. And she was just awarded the Young Architect Award for AIA Minnesota this year. And I was very happy to see that today in our profession, a non-conventional pathway like we both have had can be rewarded. It's no longer, if you don't practice just design, you won't be recognized. That's not the way things are anymore. And that is very exciting. So I think that there is a lot of possibility for anyone who wants to stay in the career trajectory of their training, but maybe along the way you have times in your career where a traditional pathway isn't the best fit. And today I think it is possible. I hope it's not just LHB. I hope it's our whole community. But I've had a lot of success with staying at LHB and being able to find solutions that work for our firm and for to advance all of the urgent needs of Minnesota. So that's a little summary of my path. I still have many more years that I need to keep working, so we'll see what else happens. And
It is a lifelong profession, and it's really encouraging to hear how what you're doing is also applying the skills architects have more broadly to problem solving in a way that's going to strengthen the profession. I don't think it challenges, I think it grows architects as a better utilized resource for our communities because that's what we want to be doing. We want to be solving problems for the communities around us. And it's great to to see you light up about this. What an incredible environment to find space to grow because sometimes you hear 10, 15, 20 years in the profession. Where do you go? Do you wait for the leadership to time out to take your place? Or do you start to build a network in a firm that is just expanding and growing the specialties and just the expertise and knowledge? And to go into the realm of research is another way to further grow the profession and communities. And yes, going beyond the building, that's very fascinating, especially when some of these problems we feel so frustrated trying to solve them within the walls of the building.
right.
Very fun to dip the skill sets of the firm to try and piece those things together and have bigger conversations, especially when there's research and interest in that at a state level. How do you feel the women in architecture community has supported and helped you in the past 10 years and going forward?
That's a great thing to reflect on. I feel like I made so many good friends in those first years of women in architecture that that gave me the motivation to hang in there, really that support that's needed at certain challenging times in your career. Today, I'm very busy with a 12-year-old and being the leader of my group, I have more responsibilities and I haven't relied on that network as much, but I know they're still there. It has been so exciting to see the evolution of the committee and to have been able to step out of the leadership and have it keep going for so many years. I think that all three of the founders are really impressed that we didn't need to continue our involvement because there's so much energy and commitment by others. Um, and so I still attend the meetings because I feel like this is the place for me within AIA Minnesota that I care the most about. I used to be very involved with the Committee on Environment as well, in my early years, looking for that sustainability community. Luckily, that community has also grown during this time. And I feel like I'm not going to Women in Architecture to exactly get the friendships. It's more to know that other people are experiencing similar things along the way in their careers and to continue to hear everyone's stories. Sometimes we have some very inspiring speakers, and I just leave the meeting with so much inspiration to hear what um, allied professions are doing and also to hear some of the women who are further along in their careers than me and hear what they're up to. So I guess today it's more about hearing those inspiring stories than just looking for more friendships. But it's great to see those friendships forming between some of the other members, and it does make me really happy to know that it's still a need. It's a need that in some ways we wish we didn't need a specific support group, but I also feel like we have a community and we all need to find the communities that are important to us. So for me, this community is still super important. 10 years in, I have also found the smaller group of, I think there are 6 of us working on the legacy project right now. So we've created a little offshoot and have something to do. Or like, we have some action to take every month, and it's good to have something that gives you some purpose, right?
I am all for the side projects. The gap that women in architecture is filling now, do you see that continuing into the future? Do you see the profession as a whole changing in a way that would ever make it unnecessary or shift the purpose?
Yeah, so I think that as our numbers of gender balance in the profession and the firms and the leaders of the firms grow, it certainly changes the need for or the purpose of the committee, in my opinion. However, the work on gender equity has so far to go. We've people who have done very specific gender equity training have maybe moved the needle a little bit and furthered their education. But in our um, we recently completed some gender equity training at LHB that was pretty extensive and involved everybody in the whole firm in different capacities, and it illustrated how much farther we still have to go. And so, even though our numbers are growing and the balance of gender is changing in some organizations, I think it will be a very long time before we wouldn't need a place of our own anymore.
If you could have a crystal ball or make whatever change you wanted, what would you hope to see in 2034? What do you hope to see in the profession of architecture?
Well, I do hope to see the gender balance of women gaining architecture degrees and becoming licensed and becoming leaders in firms. So I would like to see 50-50 for all 3 of those parts of the trajectory. I don't necessarily anymore think that every person who goes to architecture school needs to become a licensed architect. That isn't necessarily what I'm saying here. I'm just saying of the people who do become licensed, let's represent our society's population. I think that I would like to also recognize Mary Margaret Zendran for doing so much for our professional organization in the last um, few years. I can't remember what year she started anymore, but she has certainly done mm, a, a really, made major cultural change. And so I think that if that can be done within our professional organization, it can also be done within the firms. And I think we will see a lot more change in the next 10 years. I think that the leadership part is still a challenge. That's a hard one. We have had a lot of change within my organization that gives me a lot of hope, but it has been slow. So we need patience and we need persistence. And we have to keep finding the energy to continue to do this work so that we do continue to have change in our profession. I think it takes a lot of energy. So some days it's something I'm working really hard on, and some days I'm letting other people do that work and watching and waiting. And we have had a lot of change, so I do think it's possible.
I think those are great secrets to helping that change happen, that patience, persistence, and passion. So one last question, where do you find your passion?
Oh, I haven't thought about that one. I think, like I said at the beginning, my thing has always been making a difference. And so one of my core values and what I have to be doing. Otherwise, I guess I just wouldn't be motivated anymore. So I have to know that I'm making a difference. And yeah, working with others on a project with purpose gives me that passion.
And I think you're in a great place for what you're describing. That's really exciting. Long-term, long vision sort of work. Well, thank you, Maureen.
I can't wait to hear the rest of them and to connect with everyone in November.
This podcast interview is brought to you by members of the AIA Women in Architecture Committee in preparation for a networking session at the Minnesota 2024 AIA Conference on Architecture. We hope to see you at this fall conference. Otherwise, please check out the AIA Minnesota website. We have a calendar of upcoming events with women in architecture, or you can join our monthly meetings where we have engaging discussions. We connect with one another to support and celebrate the accomplishments of women in architecture.